I'm Serafina, and I thought I knew what humiliation felt like, until my husband called me ugly in front of his friends and slapped me in the middle of a crowded restaurant. I wish I could say that was the worst of it, that it ended there, but it didn't, because behind that slap was something bigger, a marriage built on lies, manipulation, and control. A man who didn't just belittle me in public, but stripped away my independence in private. A family that stood by him, covering for his deception. And when I finally tried to leave, I realized it wasn't just my heart at stake. Money, power, secrets, they had all been weaponized against me. The soft hum of conversation filled the restaurant, blending with the clinking of crystal glasses and the subtle notes of a grand piano playing in the background. The kind of place where the lighting was dim, the air was thick with the scent of truffle oil and aged wine, and the waiters moved with the precision of trained performers. It was the type of restaurant where appearances mattered. I had spent hours preparing for this night, choosing the perfect navy dress, styling my hair just right, even applying makeup with a careful hand, something I rarely bothered with anymore. Tonight was important. Alistair had finally invited me to meet his colleagues, something he had always avoided in the past. So why did he barely look at me when I arrived? He didn't stand up, didn't greet me with a smile or even a nod. Just a glance, the briefest flicker of his eyes, before he muttered, "Oh, you wore that?" A quiet laugh from the table. Not mine. One of his friends. My heart twisted, but I swallowed down the sting and forced a smile as I slid into my seat. "Traffic was a nightmare," I said, trying to smooth over the moment. He ignored me, already deep in conversation about work. Some project, some deal. I didn't know. I wasn't included. I sat there smiling tightly as his colleagues, 3 polished men in tailored suits, laughed at his jokes and nodded along to his stories. Whenever I tried to join in, I was met with dismissive glances or interrupted before I could finish a sentence. Alistair barely acknowledged me. The only time he spoke directly to me was to correct me or laugh at something I said. "That's not how business works, sweetheart," he said at one point, his voice coated in condescension. I shifted in my seat, my appetite fading. Then came the comments, subtle at first. "You sure you want to eat that much pasta? That dress really highlights your curves." A smirk, a chuckle from his friend. My face burned. I gritted my teeth, forcing down the lump in my throat. This wasn't new. It wasn't the first time he made me feel small. But something about tonight was different. It was meaner, more deliberate, like he wanted an audience. Then he said it. "God, you're so ugly when you get upset." The words hit like a slap before his hand even did. Silence stretched over the table. His friends stared at me, then at him, then back at their drinks, as if pretending nothing had happened. I froze. The air was knocked from my lungs. A slow, creeping nausea crawled up my throat. The room blurred, sounds muffled. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then I did the one thing I told myself I would never do again. I looked at him, hoping for some kind of remorse. Alistair just smirked. I should have left, should have stood up and walked out. But instead, I whispered, "Why are you doing this?" His expression shifted, irritation flashing across his face, as if I was the one embarrassing him. And then, his palm struck my cheek. It wasn't a hard slap, not enough to knock me back, but enough to send a sharp sting rippling across my skin. Enough to make my eyes water. Enough to make me hate myself for staying seated. The restaurant went silent. And no one moved. No one gasped. No one rushed to my defense. The waiter hesitated, then gently placed the check on the table. Alistair leaned back in his chair, as if nothing had happened. "She's being dramatic," he told his friends, laughing lightly. I touched my cheek. It burned. I looked around, searching for something, anything, that would tell me I wasn't crazy, that someone had seen what just happened. But all I found were averted gazes, the uncomfortable shuffle of cutlery, the quiet clinking of glasses being raised to lips that would say nothing. No one cared. The world around me didn't just witness my humiliation. They silently agreed with it. And that's when I knew. This wasn't the first time he had tried to break me. It was just the first time I saw it for what it really was. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past the windshield, my grip on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The slap still burned on my cheek, but it was nothing compared to the fire raging in my chest. When I stepped inside our house, the silence felt suffocating. Alistair was nowhere to be found. Of course he wasn't. He was probably out with his friends, laughing, drinking, celebrating his latest triumph, humiliating his wife. I kicked off my heels, barely noticing the way they clattered against the floor. My reflection caught my eye in the hallway mirror. I looked, unrecognizable. Smudged mascara streaked my cheeks, my lipstick was smeared, my expression hollow. I lifted my fingers to my cheek, tracing the red mark his hand had left behind. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Look at yourself, Sarah. Look what you've become." I grabbed a bottle of wine from the kitchen, my hands shaking as I poured a glass. The first sip burned down my throat, but I didn't stop. I needed something to dull the edge, something to quiet the voice screaming in my head. Maybe for the first time in my marriage, I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. It wasn't just tonight. It had never been just one night. I had let this happen, piece by piece, over the years. I thought back to the beginning, how Alistair had convinced me, so easily, to hand over control of our finances. "It's just easier this way," he had said, his voice smooth, reassuring. "You hate dealing with numbers, don't you? Let me handle it, baby. I'm better at this." I had nodded, relieved that I wouldn't have to stress over bills and budgets. He had taken my credit card, telling me he'd hold on to it for emergencies. He had suggested we consolidate our accounts, for simplicity, and I had let him. Months later, when I'd tried to log into our bank account, I found that the password had been changed. "Oh, I updated it," he had said offhandedly, sipping his coffee. "I'll send it to you later." He never did. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. We were a team, right? Marriage was about trust. But over time, I noticed the way he dismissed me whenever I asked about money. "Sarah, do you not trust me?" His tone always held a hint of accusation, just enough to make me feel guilty. So I stopped asking. I didn't notice how far he had pushed me out of my own life until it was too late. Then came the comments. They had started small, almost playful. "That dress isn't the most flattering on you." Then they became sharper. "You looked better when we first met." And eventually, they turned cruel. "You should be grateful I married you." I used to believe he didn't mean it, that maybe I was being too sensitive, maybe I was reading into things that weren't there. But now, standing in my kitchen, feeling the sting of his palm still fresh on my skin, I knew the truth. This was never an accident. Alistair had spent years chipping away at me, little by little, molding me into something smaller, something weaker, something that wouldn't fight back. And I had let him. I had let him steal my independence. I had let him tear apart my confidence. But tonight? Tonight, he made a mistake. Because he thought I would stay silent. He thought I would wake up tomorrow and pretend like nothing had happened. But for the first time in years, I felt something other than fear. I felt anger. Real, burning, unshakable anger. I set the empty wine glass on the counter and exhaled. My hands no longer trembled. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let him win. And fury, I realized, was a far more dangerous thing than grief. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the past few hours press down on me. My cheek still burned from Alistair's slap, but it was nothing compared to the fire raging inside me. Sleep wasn't an option, not after tonight. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I turned it over, expecting a message from him, some half-hearted excuse, maybe even a warning. But no, it was a notification from our joint bank account, a transaction, another withdrawal. Alistair was still out, somewhere in the city, drinking, celebrating his cruelty. He wasn't thinking about me. He never did. I reached for my laptop, my fingers moving faster than my mind. I opened our banking records, scrolling through the recent activity, searching for something, anything, to explain where all this money had been going. Then I saw it. Transfers, large ones, thousands of dollars moved in increments, funneled into an account under a name I didn't recognize. Emma Caldwell. The name sent a cold chill through me. I knew it. I had heard it before, one of Alistair's employees. He had mentioned her in passing, just once, laughing at a joke she made at work. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now, my stomach twisted. I clicked through more records, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The pattern was unmistakable. The money wasn't just disappearing, it was being cleaned. Shifted from business accounts, disguised as expenses, before landing in Emma's hands. It wasn't just an affair, it was fraud. I sat back in my chair, my breathing uneven. He wasn't just betraying me, he was risking everything. And for what? A girl barely out of college? A thrill? My hands clenched into fists. I wasn't going to let this slide. I found her number in Alistair's phone records. He had called her just yesterday. At first, Emma didn't answer. But I wasn't the type to let things go anymore. I called again. And again. The fourth time, she picked up. "Who the hell is this?" she snapped, her voice groggy, irritated. "Let's not play games, Emma," I said, my voice sharper than I had ever heard it. "I know who you are. More importantly, I know what you've been doing with my husband." Silence. Then a breathy laugh. "Oh, please. You're the wife, right? The one he—" She cut herself off, but I heard it. The way her tone dripped with amusement. She thought this was funny. "You think this is about the affair?" I interrupted. "You really think that's the problem here?" Another pause. I let it stretch, let her squirm. Then I went for the kill. "I know about the money." The smugness in her voice evaporated. "What?" "The transfers, Emma. The ones from Alistair's business accounts. The ones that end up in yours." A sharp inhale on the other end of the line. Don't bother lying. My voice was steady, cold. "I have the records. I have the proof. And if you don't start talking, I'll make sure your name is the first one handed over when this all comes crashing down." I could hear the shift in her breathing, the panic creeping in. He told me it was fine," she blurted. "That it was just a temporary fix. That he had it handled." I let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah? And what exactly did he promise you, Emma? That he'd take care of you? That he'd leave me for you?" More silence. "He told me you two weren't really together," she finally whispered. "That you were just—" "A burden," I finished for her. The words didn't hurt. Not anymore. I had spent years carrying his weight, bending myself into whatever shape he needed. A wife, a trophy, a woman who didn't ask questions. But now, I was something else entirely. Emma exhaled shakily. "What are you going to do?" I smiled. "Oh, sweetheart," I murmured. "I'm going to burn his world to the ground." By the time I hung up, my mind was already racing ahead. I backed up everything, screenshots of bank transfers, messages, call logs. I saved them to a drive, then emailed copies to myself just in case. Alistair thought he had me trapped, thought I was too weak, too blind to see what he was doing. He was wrong. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make sure he had nowhere left to run. And the first step? Letting him know I wasn't afraid anymore. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting pale golden lines across my bedroom floor. I hadn't slept much. My mind kept replaying my conversation with Emma, the way her voice had cracked when she realized the game was over. But it wasn't just her. Alistair didn't just betray me. He had built his entire life on a foundation of deception, and now, brick by brick, I was going to tear it down. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated. It could be a lawyer, a bank representative, someone responding to the storm I had begun to stir. But the second I picked up, I knew I was wrong. A low, distorted voice crackled through the speaker. "You need to stop." I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. If you know what's good for you, the voice continued, you'll drop this. Walk away while you still can. A slow chill crawled down my spine. I forced my voice to stay steady. Who the hell is this? A pause. Then a quiet chuckle. Just a friendly warning, Mrs. Caldwell. The line clicked dead. I stood there for a long moment, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. My coffee sat untouched, growing cold. Someone was watching. Someone was listening. And someone wanted me to be scared. Alistair came home around noon, looking as smug as ever. I didn't waste time. I got a call this morning, someone telling me to drop it. He barely glanced at me as he loosened his tie. And? I repeated, my voice rising. You don't even pretend to care? He let out a dry laugh. Jesus, Sierra, you sound paranoid. Maybe it was a scam call. Maybe you're just looking for a reason to play the victim. I clenched my fists. He was testing me, waiting for me to crack, to spiral into self-doubt the way I always had before. Not this time. You know what I think? I said, stepping closer. I think you're scared, and you should be. His smirk faltered for just a second. But then, a knock at the door, and just like that, the mask slipped back into place. Let me guess, I muttered. Your parents? Evangeline and Edmund Caldwell swept into the house like they owned it. Sarah, dear, Evangeline cooed, her red painted lips stretching into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We heard about everything, and we thought it was best to come speak with you directly. She settled into the chair across from me, legs crossed, perfectly poised. Edmund stood behind her, silent as ever, his mere presence carrying the weight of quiet intimidation. Alistair sat beside them, arms folded. I knew exactly what this was. Damage control. Evangeline let out a soft sigh, tilting her head. Alistair told us you've been a bit emotional lately. I nearly laughed. Emotional? Edmund finally spoke, his voice deep, measured. Sarah, we understand you're upset. Marriages go through difficulties. But what you're doing, digging through finances, making accusations, it isn't healthy. I stared at them, trying to wrap my mind around the sheer audacity. Alistair laundered money, lied, cheated. And I was the one in the wrong? You expect me to stay quiet? I asked, my voice dangerously even. Evangeline reached forward, placing a delicate hand on mine. Sweetheart, we're simply saying, if you let this go, we can make things easier for you. There it was. The bribe. Alistair's eyes flicked toward me, watching, waiting. I pulled my hand away. And if I don't? Evangeline's expression didn't change, but something in her gaze sharpened. Then you'll be making things much harder for yourself. I exhaled slowly. Get out of my house. Her smile flickered, but she stood, smoothing down the front of her designer coat. Think about it, dear, she said sweetly. We wouldn't want this to get uglier than it needs to be. That night, I found an envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single bullet. I stared at it, my pulse roaring in my ears. This wasn't just about reputation anymore. Someone was willing to escalate. I placed the bullet on the table, sat down, and took a deep breath. Then I grabbed my phone. Camille answered on the second ring. Sarah? What's wrong? I swallowed hard. I need your help, and I need it now. The next morning, I sent a message to Evangeline and Edmund. Simple, director. I don't scare easily. If they thought I was going to back down, they had no idea who they were dealing with. And the next step? Striking first before they could tighten their grip. I sat across from Camille in her office, my hands clasped together as she shuffled through a thick folder of documents. The weight of the moment pressed down on my chest, but beneath it there was something else. Something sharper. Determination. This is it, Camille said, sliding the paperwork toward me. Once you sign, it's official. Divorce. But it wasn't just that. This wasn't about walking away. It was about burning it all down. I don't just want out, I murmured, gripping the pen. I want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. Camille nodded, her expression unreadable. Then we do this right. But Sarah. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. You know he won't take this lying down, right? I met her gaze and exhaled. I'm counting on it. I signed my name. Alistair walked into work that morning, expecting business as usual. He got something else entirely. He barely had time to set down his briefcase before his assistant hurried over, looking pale. Sir, you need to go to accounting. A pit formed in his stomach. When he entered the office, a team of corporate auditors was already there, papers spread across the conference table. What the hell is this? He demanded. His boss, a man who had once admired him, only glanced up coldly. Routine internal review, he said. Some flagged transactions came up. We just have some questions. Alistair schooled his features, forcing a smirk. You don't actually think I... We'll see, his boss cut in. He could feel it, the shift in the air, the weight of the scrutiny pressing against his carefully curated image. Someone had tipped them off. His mind immediately went to one person. Sarah. I was stirring my coffee when I saw him. I hadn't expected to run into Alistair that morning, but it was almost poetic. Him, fresh out of his crumbling kingdom, stepping into the same cafe as me. His gaze locked onto mine the second he saw me. And then, just like I predicted, he snapped, What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was loud enough to draw attention. People turned, glancing between us. I calmly took a sip. Getting coffee? His jaw clenched. You went to my company. Did I? I tilted my head. Or did your own actions finally catch up to you? His hands balled into fists at his sides. You're trying to ruin me. I set my cup down and looked him straight in the eye. No, Alistair, you ruined yourself. The silence in the cafe stretched, thick and suffocating. He wasn't used to this, to being challenged, to not being able to control the narrative. For the first time, he looked uncertain. But I knew better. He wasn't backing down. He was planning his next move. And so was I. I woke up to the sharp chime of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. The screen was flooded with notifications, texts, emails, missed calls. At first, I thought it was Camille with an update, but as I scrolled, my stomach dropped. Liar, gold digger, crazy beach. Post after post, message after message. Alistair had gone public. He wasn't just fighting back. He was trying to bury me alive. I opened one of the emails from an old mutual friend, Marissa. Sarah, I don't know what's happening, but Alistair is telling everyone you're mentally unstable. He's saying you made up the fraud claims, that you've been cheating on him for years. He even said you drained his accounts and tried to frame him. I stared at the words, my fingers trembling against the phone. A sharp, bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. Of course! He knew he was losing control, so he did what men like him always did, painted himself as the victim. He was the loving husband. I was the manipulative, unstable wife. It was predictable and pathetic, but I wasn't going to let him win. I had barely finished my first cup of coffee when the second blow came. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I considered ignoring it, but something in my gut told me to pick up. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? A pause, then a voice, low and unrecognizable. This isn't just about your marriage anymore, the caller said. Walk away. A chill crawled up my spine. Who is this? Silence. Then a quiet exhale. You don't want to know. The line went dead. I sat frozen for a moment, my heart pounding against my ribs. This was different from the first call. The first was intimidation. This was a warning. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to Camille's office. This is escalating, Camille said, pacing behind her desk, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. No kidding, I muttered, tossing my phone onto her desk. First, he slanders me. Now I'm getting anonymous threats. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Sarah, we both knew Alistair would retaliate, But this means he's desperate. I frowned. Desperate enough to do what? She hesitated. To pull strings. You don't know how many people he has in his pocket. If he's reaching beyond just his smear campaign, it means he's trying to shut you down before you can destroy him. The weight of her words settled in my chest. I wasn't just fighting Alistair anymore. I was fighting whoever he had been protecting all these years. But if he thought that would scare me, he was wrong. The cracks in his perfect facade were starting to show. By late afternoon, Celeste, Alistair's younger sister, called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Sarah. Her voice was softer than I remembered. I waited. She took a breath. I don't know what to believe. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. Celeste? I just mean... She hesitated. He's my brother, but I know he lies. I know he manipulates people. This is a lot. Mom and Dad keep telling me you're doing this for money, but I don't know. For the first time, there was doubt in her voice. You know the truth, I said gently. You've always known. You just didn't want to see it. A beat of silence. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I sighed. You don't have to do anything, Celeste, but don't be part of the lie. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shaky and uncertain. He won't stop, Sarah. You know that, right? I smiled bitterly. Neither will I. That night, my doorbell rang. I expected Camille, maybe even Celeste, but when I opened the door, it was someone I never thought I'd see. Dorian, Alistair's co-worker. He looked uneasy, glancing over his shoulder before stepping inside. I can't stay long, he said quickly, but you need to know, Alistair is losing his grip at work. The financial review? It's worse than he thought. People are talking. I straightened. How bad? Dorian exhaled. Bad enough that some of us don't want to go down with him. He met my gaze. I have access to his records, Sarah. Emails, expense reports. The real ones, not the doctored versions. Hope sparked in my chest. If you're willing to fight, he said, I can help. I smiled for the first time all day. I'm more than willing. The moment Dorian left, I opened my laptop and got to work. I wasn't going to waste my breath defending myself to the world. I didn't need to, because I had something Alistair never would. The truth, and I was about to use it. The message came late at night. Emma Caldwell. We need to talk. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether this was another trap. But deep down, I knew better. Alistair had never been the type to show loyalty, only to demand it. And women like Emma, they were disposable to him. I called her. The second she picked up, I could hear the rage in her voice. He used me. I let out a dry laugh. You're just figuring that out? No. She exhaled shakily. I knew. I thought he'd at least keep his promises. She had been played, lied to, left hanging the second she was no longer useful. I didn't pity her, but I understood. I had been that woman once. What do you have? I asked. A beat of silence. Then, a quiet, almost bitter chuckle. Everything. Emma didn't just have receipts. She had proof. Bank statements, transaction logs, internal emails from Alistair, instructing her on how to disguise fraudulent transfers as business expenses. She had been his personal laundromat, funneling stolen money through her accounts while he promised her security, a future. Now she was out for blood. I forwarded everything to Camille. Her response came within minutes. Camille. This is it. He's done. I smiled for the first time in days. It started small. A whistleblower post on an anonymous forum. A leaked screenshot here, an email there. At first, people weren't sure if it was real, but then more surfaced, and more. Soon, Alistair's name was everywhere. Corporate fraud, embezzlement, hidden accounts. His carefully built empire wasn't just shaking, it was collapsing. And I was only getting started. The phone call came just after noon. Camille's voice was buzzing with energy. The company's launching an internal investigation. I closed my eyes, letting the satisfaction settle in my bones. Alistair had spent years building his reputation, weaving lies so seamlessly that no one had ever questioned them. Until now. Are they taking it seriously? I asked. They have no choice, she said. Too much has surfaced. They can't ignore it anymore. I glanced at my laptop, at the flood of messages, the articles popping up on news sites. People were talking. Employees were coming forward. The pressure was mounting. Good, I murmured. Not just good, Sarah. Perfect. He's spiraling. I could only imagine it. The man who had once controlled everything, watching it all slip through his fingers. I should have expected his retaliation. By that evening, he was everywhere. Social media posts, desperate interviews, claims that I had been the abuser, that I was behind the fraud. He called in favors, pulled strings, tried to paint himself as the real victim. But the cracks in his story were obvious. Too many people had started talking, his former employees, old friends. Even his own sister, Celeste, publicly distanced herself. For the first time, Alistair was losing control. And I was winning. Then came the final blow. I sat in front of the camera, my hands steady, my voice calm. I told my story. I detailed the years of control, of manipulation, the gaslighting, the financial abuse, the threats, the slap at the restaurant that started it all. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for sympathy. I just spoke the truth. By the time I finished, the world knew exactly who Alistair Caldwell really was. His kingdom was burning, and I was the one who struck the match. But the fire wasn't out just yet. Alistair walked into his office that morning, his posture stiff, his jaw clenched. He had spent the night calling in favors, trying to find an escape route, a way to spin this disaster into something salvageable. But as soon as he stepped off the elevator, he knew. Something was wrong. The office was too quiet. Employees avoided his gaze, whispering behind their hands. His assistant wasn't at her desk. Instead, 2 security guards stood by the entrance to the conference room, waiting for him. Dorian was inside, along with the entire executive board. His boss, a man who had once shaken his hand with respect, now looked at him with something else. Disgust. Alistair, his boss began. Sit. Alistair didn't move. This is a mistake. Dorian slid a folder across the table. No, Alistair, you made a mistake. Inside were pages of transaction records, signatures, email correspondence, every single one tied back to him. The room was silent. Then his boss sighed. Your position is terminated, effective immediately. Legal action is already in motion. Alistair's world tilted. You can't do this. One of the executives leaned back in his chair. You did this to yourself. The security guard stepped forward. Alistair barely processed it when they gripped his arms and escorted him out. Through the halls, past his employees. People who had once feared him, admired him. Now they only watched. And some of them smiled. By the time he reached the sidewalk, reporters were already there. Microphones, cameras, flashing lights. Someone shouted, Alistair! Do you have a statement? He turned away, head down. His accounts were frozen, his reputation destroyed. And the legal battle? It was just beginning. Alistair drove straight home. He needed his family, his father's connections, his mother's ruthless strategy. But when he opened the door, they were already waiting. Evangeline sat in the grand living room, legs crossed, sipping tea as if this were nothing more than another scandal to sweep under the rug. Edmund stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Celeste sat off to the side, arms folded, eyes downcast. Alistair took a shaky breath. You heard. His mother finally looked up. Of course we heard. Then you know I need... You need? Evangeline's voice was sharp. You need? She set her cup down with a quiet clink. Do you have any idea what you've done? Alistair's patience snapped. I am your son. Edmund turned then, his face carved from stone. Not anymore. The words hit him harder than any scandal ever could. I built everything I have for this family, Alistair growled. Evangeline tilted her head. And now you've ruined it. He turned to Celeste, desperate. You believe them? For a moment, her lips parted. But then she just shook her head. I don't have to believe them, Alistair. I just know. Alistair's fists clenched. You're abandoning me? Evangeline exhaled, as if bored. We're cleaning up your mess. She stood, smoothing the fabric of her dress. And you, dear, are no longer our concern. Alistair could only watch as his family turned their backs on him. He was alone. Completely, utterly alone. I met him one last time. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see him, see what was left. He looked smaller than before, slumped in a chair at a quiet cafe. No expensive suits, no polished arrogance, just a man who had finally been brought to his knees. I sat across from him, folding my hands on the table. This is the part where you blame me. He didn't respond. I let out a soft laugh. Or maybe this is the part where you beg. Still nothing. I studied him, taking in the hollow look in his eyes, the slight tremble in his hands. You know what's funny? I said, leaning closer. I don't even hate you anymore. His gaze flicked to mine, and for the first time, there was nothing behind it. No calculation, no fury, just emptiness. I stood, slipping my purse over my shoulder. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Alistair. And with that, I walked away. For the first time, revenge tasted bittersweet. But I knew one thing. I was finally free. And now, I had to learn how to live again. I woke up to soft morning light spilling through the sheer curtains of my new apartment. The space was still unfamiliar, the walls too bare, the furniture too neatly arranged. But it was mine. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to the sound of someone else's footsteps, the weight of someone else's expectations pressing against my chest. I rolled out of bed, stretched, and padded to the kitchen. The silence felt strange, almost deafening. There was no tension in the air, no sharp voice waiting to cut me down before the day even started. Just me. I brewed my own coffee, took the first sip, and let the warmth settle in my chest. I had spent years waking up in a house that never felt like home. Now, standing here, in my own space, drinking my own coffee, I finally felt free. I met Camille at a cafe downtown. It had become our unofficial headquarters, the place where she broke the worst news and where I pieced myself back together. She slid a file across the table, tapping the cover. It's official. The divorce is finalized, the company's pressing charges, and Alistair, well, he's done. I exhaled, staring at the folder. It was everything I had fought for, but now that it was here, it felt anticlimactic. Camille studied me. You don't look thrilled. I swirled my coffee absently. I thought I'd feel something more. Satisfaction, maybe. Relief. And? I shrugged. I just feel done. Camille nodded, as if she understood. That's because this was never about revenge, Sarah. You weren't trying to win. You were trying to survive. I smiled softly. I guess I did. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Celeste. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A quiet sigh on the other end. Then, can we talk? I agreed to meet her at a quiet park near my apartment. She was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, fingers nervously twisting in her lap. When she looked up, she seemed different. Lighter, maybe. Less like the woman who had stood in the shadows of her family. More like someone finally stepping into the light. I owe you an apology, she said without hesitation. I shook my head. You don't? I do, she insisted. I knew what he was, Sarah. I always did. But I was too afraid to say anything, to do anything. I let my parents control me the same way he controlled you. I swallowed hard. I wasn't sure what I had expected from this conversation, but honesty wasn't it. She took a deep breath. When you stood up to him, it changed things for me. You made me realize I don't have to be part of that family's lies anymore. Something inside me softened. I had spent so long thinking I was alone in my pain. But maybe I wasn't the only one who had been trapped. I reached over, squeezing her hand. Then don't be. She gave me a small, grateful smile. I won't. That evening, another message came in. Dorian. Dorian. I heard you were looking for a fresh start. If you're interested, there's a position at my firm. No pressure, just think about it. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. A fresh start. Not just escaping something toxic, but building something new. I typed back 2 words. Me. I'm in. Then I stepped out onto my balcony, breathing in the city air. For years, I had spent every waking moment just trying to survive. But now, for the first time, I was finally living. Life has a way of teaching us lessons in the most brutal, unforgiving ways. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that survival isn't enough. You deserve to live. Truly live. For years, I thought endurance was strength. I believed that if I just held on long enough, things would change. That love meant sacrificing parts of myself until there was nothing left. But I was wrong. Strength isn't staying in a place where you are belittled, controlled, or manipulated. Strength is walking away, even when you're terrified of what comes next. Maybe you've been in a situation like mine. Maybe you felt stuck, unheard, afraid to take that first step because you don't know if you'll land on solid ground. Let me tell you this, you will. The fear of the unknown is nothing compared to the slow suffocation of staying where you're not valued. And if you're watching this, wondering if it's too late for you, it's not. It never is. You can start over. You can reclaim your life. You can build something new, something better, something that is yours. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from something toxic? What gave you the courage to finally say, enough? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story resonated with you, or tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories reach. And if this video wasn't for you, I'd love to hear why. Your voice matters. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next story. Because life isn't just about endings, it's about the powerful new beginnings waiting on the other side.
Oh, he looks as dumb as you, I guess. Kids of someone who dropped out of middle school are also stupid. A classmate named Catherine, who for some reason always looked down on me, looked into Ryan's face. She was a Harvard graduate. She was good-looking, but had a terrible personality. That's what Catherine said after looking at Ryan's face. I could tolerate being mocked myself, but it pained me when she insulted my son, Ryan. Despite my patience, I raised my voice. His education level doesn't matter. Just because you went to Harvard doesn't give you the right to speak to my son like that. Seeing this, Ryan said in a cold voice, "Dad, this woman, it's Mrs. Smith, right? Should we fire her?" Ryan might look like he's 10, but he's no ordinary 10-year-old. Catherine would later come to realize this. My name is John, probably a very average 8th grader at that time. Part of the soccer team, sometimes on the bench, sometimes not. Unlike the noticeable guys, I don't have a girlfriend. Yes, just an utterly average 8th grader. I had one strength and one weakness. First, my strength was math. I wasn't good at all subjects, but for some reason, math just clicked for me. I solved problems without much struggle, even if it was an advanced problem I saw for the first time. I was the only one in my grade who could solve some tough problems, and I've been holding the top rank in math since admission. I especially loved binary numbers. It felt romantic to count in a system other than base 10. It felt like a game and was very fun. On the other hand, my weakness, or rather, the person I couldn't stand, was a beautiful classmate named Catherine Smith from elementary school. For some reason, Catherine treated everyone else normally, but she was cold to me. We used to play together in early elementary school and even visited each other's houses. But around our school trip in elementary school, she suddenly became distant and would only speak ill of me. "John, don't slack off during cleaning. Come on, take out the trash." It wasn't just me who was slacking off, but Catherine would say this and toss the trash can at me. "John, don't just stand there. Put out the flame. You're so useless." Anyone could turn off the burner during our science experiments, but Catherine would always complain to me. Moreover, she'd say things like, "I can't touch that alcohol lamp now that John has touched it," as if I was something dirty. I wanted to retort, but Catherine was bold, beautiful, and one of the top-ranking girls in our class hierarchy. I could never talk back and just took her remarks. I always thought that one day I'd prove her wrong, but the only thing I had over Catherine was math. However, she was decent at math and was top of the class in overall grades throughout middle school. Catherine kept targeting me, and as fate would have it, we ended up going to the same high school. So my high school life started with the same strength and weakness. Then during my sophomore year of high school, my life took a 180-degree turn. My father, who was the backbone of our family, passed away. He loved fishing in rivers. One morning, while going fishing, he drove the wrong way on a mountain road and plunged off a cliff, taking his car with him, and he never came back. Our family, which had been living a modest and peaceful life, was shattered. I can never forget my mother's face when she received the call from the local police. I'll never forget the pale face of my father when we rushed to the hospital. After my father passed away, my mother, who had always been a stay-at-home mom, decided to work as a temp. But she couldn't keep a job for long because the sudden loss of my father often made her ill. Just when I thought she'd been working for a while, she'd end up bedridden. She'd get better and start working again, but within about 3 months, she'd fall again. I thought I couldn't put her through that anymore. I decided to give up on college. I'd even drop out of high school and start working right away. I wanted to bring my mom back to being a stay-at-home mom. I made up my mind. The third time she fell, Catherine, who always criticized me, confronted me when I decided to quit high school. "What are you thinking? Are you out of your mind? Without a high school diploma, you won't stand a chance in society. You have just 1 more year of high school. Don't quit now. Only a fool would drop out." Catherine strongly disapproved of my decision, but there was no changing my mind. I handed in my resignation that week and left high school by the weekend. After quitting, I first took a part-time job at a local convenience store. I'd never worked before since my high school didn't allow part-time jobs, so every day was a new experience for me. It was tiring, but I had committed to supporting our livelihood, and there was no turning back. As I got used to the convenience store job, I began to work part-time at a British pub in the evenings. My mother, seeing the occasional bums I came home with, would cry, "Right now, I don't have the money for college tuition, and I'm maxed out just supporting my mom and me." But a new dream was born in me, to save up money and go to college someday. My dates with Kate were mostly in her apartment or on the university campus, but they were always a lot of fun. The university's cafeteria was affordable and tasty. Plus, considering the appetites of college students, they had plenty of large portion options, which was great. Kate loved the parfait from the cafeteria. Every time I bought her one and brought it to her table, she'd be so delighted. If you want to earn more, you can't just work more hours. There's a limit to how many hours a person can work. Instead, improve your skills. If you can earn more per hour, you make more even if you work the same hours. You should focus on learning, Kate would always tell me. I had a tendency to pick up more shifts whenever I saw something Kate might want. But her words made me hold back and consistently work on improving my current skills. I learned to use software I couldn't before and even got a culinary license. Though it cost money to study and sometimes felt like a financial setback, once I got that culinary license, the manager at the pub I worked at praised me and raised my hourly wage as a result. I was able to buy Kate the necklace she had been eyeing for Christmas. With my improved computer skills, I got a job as a computer class instructor through a friend's recommendation, leaving my convenience store job that I had since dropping out of high school. Teaching computer skills to folks in the community meant a significant bump in my monthly earnings. Around this time, my mom, feeling healthier, started working part-time, reducing the financial burden on our household. Little by little, I started saving money. With savings in hand, I began to think about marrying Kate. And when Kate graduated from grad school in the spring, we joyfully tied the knot. Our life together, as she started her job as a researcher after her postgraduate studies, was incredibly happy. We rented a small place. Whichever of us got home first would make dinner, and we'd eat together every evening. Even the moments just lying together, I felt so happy being aware of Kate's presence beside me. I continued to juggle my jobs as a computer instructor and a part-timer in the pub's kitchen. One day, the manager approached me, saying he wanted me to run the kitchen for a newly opened pub. It seemed I was the only part-timer with a culinary license, so my hourly wage increased a bit. "John, let's save the extra money for when you go to college someday," Kate suggested. Even though I wanted to treat her to all her favourite foods, she said, "I'm quite content with my current life. You should definitely go to college. You love maths so much." Saying that, Kate wouldn't let me use the money for our date nights. I even proposed sending more money to my mom, but after hearing from Kate about college, she refused. And that's how I began saving for college. Then one day, Kate, blushing, told me something. "I'm pregnant." We were truly at the peak of our happiness. Our son, Ryan, turned out to be an astonishing prodigy. Much to our surprise, Kate and I were both good at math, so we expected him to like it to some extent. But he exceeded our expectations. In no time, he could count from 1 to 100 and started solving quadratic equations, even before kindergarten. He quickly became fond of binary, my favourite, and could convert decimals to binary instantly. Kate continued her work part-time, and after finishing her research at the lab and picking up Ryan from daycare, she'd chat with him about math and ways he could understand. Ryan always listened with shining eyes. By then, I had quit the pub job and had become a full-time instructor at the computer class. Ryan quickly learned to operate the computer I taught him and easily outgrew the programming materials for elementary school students. I wonder what kind of person he'll grow up to be. One night while stroking the sleeping Ryan's hair, Kate said this and suddenly began to cry. "Kate, what's wrong?" It was such a cheerful topic, so what happened? Looking at her face with suspicion, Kate clung to me and began to cry. Then she revealed, "I've been diagnosed with a brain tumour." I was stunned. Only 6 months left. I couldn't come to grips with Kate's confession and remained silent for a long time. I need to support Kate. I knew, but I couldn't help picturing my father's pale face. Now even Kate, it reminded me of the atmosphere when my mother answered the phone that day. "It's terrifying. Please tell me it's a lie. Tell me you're just groggy." I couldn't accept Kate's illness, and for a while, life continued as usual. Kate went for treatments, but she never talked about her illness. Since then, I thought maybe we could just pretend it never happened. But one day, a call came from the lab. Kate collapsed. Lying in the hospital bed, Kate had regained consciousness, but was hooked up to several lines, breathing through an oxygen mask. I wanted to look away, but the situation had escalated to a point where I couldn't. "Please look after Ryan." By the time I finally accepted the reality of her words, Kate's condition had deteriorated to a level beyond treatment. For the month before Kate passed away, we repeatedly talked about Ryan's future. Kate apologized to me and Ryan again and again. She had nothing to apologize for. The hardest part was for Kate, having to leave Ryan behind. Ryan has an incredible talent, Kate kept saying. I felt the same way. I'll do everything I can to help Ryan harness his exceptional gifts. Kate often took Ryan to the lab, where everyone adored him. She asked me to keep taking him to the lab even after she's gone. With the help of everyone in the lab, I promised to provide the best education possible. At dawn on the day when 6-year-old Ryan held back tears and said, "Mom, Dad, and I will do our best. Don't worry," Kate was called to heaven at the young age of 33. Having lost a loved one twice, I couldn't afford to break down. I had to protect my son. From that day, we started a new life, focusing on nurturing Ryan's talents. Time passed, and as Ryan's 10th birthday approached, we went to celebrate at a famous upscale restaurant known for its traditional dishes. After enjoying our meal, we were satisfied and just stepped out of the entrance when I noticed a familiar face. Catherine. It was Catherine, an old acquaintance from elementary to high school. She was there dining with her boyfriend. Upon seeing us, the corner of her mouth twisted into a smirk. "Are you dining in such a fancy restaurant, even though you dropped out of middle school? Out of your league, don't you think?" Middle school dropout or not, what's that got to do with anything? I didn't want to provoke Catherine, especially with Ryan around. I tried to leave quickly, but she kept on throwing jabs. You probably can't even educate your child properly with your dropout status, can you? I had promised Kate to prioritize Ryan's education, so this really got under my skin. Still, I tried to ignore her and started to leave with Ryan. Look at him. He's got that clueless look just like a dropout's child. I guess stupidity runs in the dropout family. Catherine pushed further. Although I could handle insults thrown at me, when she insulted Ryan, I lost it and snapped back. My educational background has nothing to do with this. Just because you went to Harvard doesn't give you the right to talk that way about my son. Ulk, come on, is it because you didn't even finish high school? Catherine continued to mock. Ryan suddenly said in a cold voice, "Dad, this woman, it's Miss Smith, right? Should we fire her?" "What are you talking about, Ryan?" Attempting to reprimand him, Ryan continued, "She's a business associate of my company. She might not know me, but I've seen her. She's from the security firm we've outsourced to, so at the very least, I can have her removed from the current project. Right, Miss Smith. Ryan, there's no need to retaliate. No matter how much one is mocked, I tried to silence Ryan's harsh words. What? How can a kid like this be associated with my company? There's no way you can fire me. Talk in your dreams, clearly shaken by being addressed by Ryan. Catherine snapped back and disappeared into the restaurant with her partner. Ryan, you shouldn't talk about firing someone like that. I advised him, but Ryan still looked discontent. Ryan can be a bit sharp at times. Well, being acknowledged as a member in Kate's lab, researching robotics as an elementary schooler, and even doing system development, I can see why he might have become a bit assertive and outspoken. But kindness and relationships are the foundation for all. Just because he's a child doesn't excuse everything he says, especially since he's working with adults on system development. He needs to be careful with his words. Ryan developed a digital photo album app. It became a massive hit with the profits. We set up a company to develop the next app. On paper, I was listed as the CEO, but in reality, Ryan was the one pulling most of the strings. The security aspect of that album app was outsourced, and Kathleen worked for the outsourced company. When I reprimanded him for speaking rudely to an outsourcer, Ryan pouted for a while. But when I said, "Mom will cry," he calmed down and muttered, "Sorry." It was a few days after the incident at the upscale restaurant. A data breach occurred at Catherine's company. Fortunately, the information leaked wasn't directly related to Ryan's app, but we found ourselves dragged into the whole mess. You did it, didn't you? holding a grudge about that incident before, Catherine accused. Ryan was, of course, outraged, feeling indignant. He was determined to find the real perpetrator. Fortunately, the method of the leak wasn't too complicated. It seemed like he'd just have to decrypt some codes and trace back a few IP addresses. With the help of everyone in the lab, when they decrypted the code and tracked the address, it surprisingly led to the computer of Tom, the boyfriend who had accompanied her to that upscale restaurant that time. When Catherine confronted him, Tom readily admitted that he had someone else do it for him. I was just jealous of how capable she seemed, able to do anything. Catherine had a flashback at those words. A time in the past when she felt inferior to her first love in math and acted mean out of frustration. She had intended to confess her real feelings and apologize for her past behavior when they graduated high school, but he dropped out and she never got the chance. Even though she was the one at fault, she harbored resentment and said hurtful things when they met again. Catherine came to my house to apologize and shared the story. I was utterly shocked to see the proud Catherine, almost as if bowing her head to the ground in remorse. Her confession that she once had feelings for me was even more startling. It made me realize anew how emotions can become so tangled that they're hard to control. Ryan didn't say much, but he seemed to sense something in Catherine's sincere apology and her vow to help Tom get back on the right track. Kate, Ryan just turned 10 today. We're visiting Kate's grave. Ryan's photo app is still selling really well. The new features are loved by the customers, and the add-ons are selling, he reported in front of Kate's grave. But I did something wrong, Ryan admitted on his own. Some people I work with spoke ill of me, and I retaliated spitefully, even though I was the stronger one. I ended up bullying the weaker person. Had he truly realized his mistake? As a parent, I felt relieved to see Ryan reflecting on his actions. From now on, I'll be kinder to others. Even if someone speaks ill of me, I won't retaliate. So, Mom, you can be at peace. Kate, Ryan has grown so much, both in heart and body. He's truly maturing. And I have something else I want to share, Kate. I've decided to go to college next year. I plan to study engineering and work seriously on system development alongside Ryan and the others, he exclaimed with enthusiasm. I used to only be involved in company management, but honestly, I've always wanted to be part of the development. Not just for bug checks, but to be deeply involved. I thought going to college would be the best way to achieve that. When I grow up, I'll go to college too. I want to attend the same one Mom did. You already visited college research labs, don't you, Ryan? But you should definitely go to college, maybe even grad school. Yeah, and in the future, I want to be a researcher like Mom. I'll leave the company to you, Dad, Ryan said with a mischievous grin. Kate, he's growing up so strong and capable. It seems like it'll be a long time before I come to see you, but by then, I'll have plenty of stories to share. So please wait for me there, I whispered to Kate in my heart. All right, Ryan, let's grab some ice cream from the campus cafeteria on our way home, I suggested. Yay, Ryan cheered. We started walking hand in hand on our way home, the scent of spring beginning to mingle with the air. My wife and daughter left me when I was ill. Years later, they came back to take over my house. But let's start from the beginning. Initially, I received a diagnosis of advanced Hodgkin's lymphoma, which was surprising. I had always led an active lifestyle, maintained a healthy diet, and consistently attended my annual doctor's appointments. The oncologist explained that the precise reasons behind the cancer remained unclear. Despite the slim chance of survival with rigorous therapy, I was determined to fight for my life. After receiving my diagnosis, I sat down with my wife of 15 years, Daisy, and our teenage daughter, Luna, to break the news to them. Understandably, they were devastated, but I reassured them that I would do my utmost to combat the disease. However, I couldn't help but worry about how this would affect our family dynamics. The doctor had warned me that the chemotherapy would be debilitating, and he mentioned that many marriages don't survive such treatments. Later that night, I expressed my concerns to my wife. She assured me that she would stand by me through sickness and do everything in her power to support me. We were financially stable thanks to my good insurance, sizable savings, and a trust fund for my late grandfather. Our house was fully paid off, and I had set aside money for Luna's college education in case anything happened to me. A week later, I started chemotherapy, and it was incredibly taxing. I returned home feeling utterly drained, as if I had been hit by a freight train. I could barely manage to feed myself, let alone perform basic tasks like bathing or walking. My wife and daughter stepped up to help me, taking care of meals, housework, driving me to chemo appointments, and ensuring my prescriptions were filled. I tried not to burden them too much and did what I could when I had the energy. This went on for 2 grueling months. However, I began to notice signs of agitation from my wife and daughter. There was a growing reluctance whenever I asked for their assistance. Even my daughter stopped responding when I requested something as simple as a glass of water or help getting some fresh air. Things reached a breaking point when I had an early chemo appointment one day. I realized I was running late, and my wife had not yet come down from our room. I called up to check on her, and she wearily suggested I take an Uber to the hospital because she was tired. I was shocked by her response, but not knowing what else to do, I called for an Uber and also contacted the hospital to request assistance, as my wife wouldn't be there to support me. Fortunately, my Uber driver was incredibly kind and ensured I safely reached the hospital. She even offered to drive me back home after my treatment. I was grateful, but it was disheartening to rely on the kindness of strangers. When I returned home that day, the situation had taken a troubling turn. After a few hours of rest, I mustered the courage to confront my wife and daughter about their recent behavior. I had noticed the distinct chill in their demeanor lately, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. I asked them if they felt like I had become a burden on them. My wife, with a heavy sigh, admitted that they were feeling overwhelmed. My daughter timidly admitted she hadn't expected me to be so needy and demanding during my illness. I decided it was time to discuss possible solutions. I suggested hiring a nurse who could come in a few days a week to assist me with daily tasks and take me to my chemotherapy sessions to make things easier. Anticipating days when I'd be too weak to walk or even talk, I ordered a wheelchair. To my relief, they agreed to this proposal. I contacted the hospital for recommendations, and they sent me a nurse who was both sweet and stern. She made sure I never missed a chemo appointment, ensured I received my medication on time, and even crafted a comprehensive care plan that included healthy meals. Everything seemed to be improving as the doctors were pleased with my progress. However, despite my efforts to ease their burden, my wife and daughter still didn't seem content. My wife in particular began feeling as though the nurse was replacing her. I suggested that if she was willing to take on the responsibilities of taking me to chemo, filling prescriptions, and ensuring I ate and took my medication on time, we could part ways with the nurse. The only reason I had a nurse was that I had become too much for my wife to handle, and she reluctantly agreed to this compromise. She asked if we could find a male nurse instead, but I explained that there were none on the hospital's recommended list. The nurse we had was chosen for her experience with cancer patients and her understanding of my specific needs. She was meticulous, attentive, and highly respectful towards both my wife and daughter. I made it clear that the only way the nurse would be replaced was if my wife and daughter were willing to shoulder her responsibilities. My wife was not pleased with this proposal and retorted that I should do more for myself instead of making my condition everyone else's problem. I tried to reason with her, explaining that there were days when I could barely lift my head, let alone stand up. The chemotherapy had taken a severe toll on my body. In a fit of rage, she stormed upstairs and began slamming doors. I chose to ignore her tantrum, realizing that her negativity would only hinder my recovery. Later that night, I received a call from my mother-in-law, who lived 2 states away. She expressed her displeasure about me bringing another woman into her daughter's house. Technically, the house was in my name, as I had owned it before our marriage, but I decided to take the high road. I politely explained that I needed help and the level of assistance I required exceeded what her daughter was willing to provide. Thus, I had to bring in a nurse to ease the burden on my family. I emphasized that the nurse's presence would only be temporary, lasting for the duration of my remaining month of chemotherapy, provided the cancer didn't persist or worsen. She didn't seem entirely convinced, but eventually she left me alone, which was all I wanted. For about a week after that conversation, things seemed relatively normal. My treatment continued to progress smoothly. Then, on one fateful day after returning from a chemotherapy session, I was greeted by a moving truck parked in front of my house. My wife and daughter had packed up all their belongings and informed me that they were going to stay at their mother's place. I was deeply hurt and upset, but exhaustion held me back from expressing my feelings properly. The timing of my wife's departure, right after my chemo sessions, when she knew I'd be utterly spent and unable to communicate effectively, felt cruel. In search of some clarity, I turned to my daughter and asked if this was what she truly wanted. After all, she was old enough to make her own decisions. Her response hit me hard. She said she would rather live with her mother because she found it too difficult to live with me. It was a painful moment, watching them leave with tears welling up in my eyes. It was precisely what I had feared when my chemo journey began, feeling unwanted and abandoned. In the midst of my emotional turmoil, my brother stepped in with a solution. He noticed the nurse spending some extra time with me that day and inquired if I had any family members nearby who could provide support. My brother lived 3 hours away and had 2 young children of his own, but he generously offered to take time off from work to stay with me until I could find a more permanent arrangement. When he arrived, he was furious about what my wife had done, referring to her as selfish and ungrateful. He pointed out that she had never had to work since our marriage, and I had always ensured she lacked nothing. My brother's time off from work was limited to a week, but he had another suggestion in mind. His wife's sister, Cara, was going through a painful divorce and needed a safe place to stay temporarily. Her soon-to-be ex-husband had been the breadwinner, leaving her with limited financial resources. Cara was also studying radiology at a nearby university on a scholarship. My home was conveniently closer to the university campus, making it an ideal solution. I would have someone in the house in case of emergencies, and she would have a haven from her tumultuous soon-to-be ex-husband. I agreed to the arrangement, assuring my brother that Cara wouldn't have to pay rent since she'd already be putting up with me. She could choose whichever bedroom she preferred. I didn't mind. My wife and daughter had taken almost everything, leaving only the bed and a few dresses. My brother stayed the rest of the week, and Cara arrived on his last day. He helped her move in, and she expressed her gratitude for letting her stay with me. Cara promised to be considerate, clean up after herself, and assist where needed. She was a genuinely kind-hearted person. I explained to her that she wouldn't have to do too much since my nurse would now be coming in 7 days a week instead of the previous 4. I bid farewell to my brother and helped Cara settle in as best as I could. In the weeks that followed, things went relatively smoothly. I missed my wife and daughter, but it appeared that I was the only one feeling that way because they didn't even bother to call or check up on me. Cara's presence proved to be a tremendous help. She took care of grocery shopping, handled most of the cleaning, and even assisted with meal preparation. Throughout this time, she never uttered a single complaint. About a month and a half after my wife's departure, I received the news that I was cancer-free. It was a momentous occasion celebrated by ringing the bell at the hospital. My nurse asked me what I wanted to do next, now that I was essentially cured. My immediate decision was to file for a unilateral divorce, freeing myself from a marriage that had proven to be unsupportive during my challenging journey. With the divorce proceedings in motion, my focus shifted toward the next crucial step, recovering from cancer. It was a journey in itself. Slowly but surely, I began to regain my strength. My hair grew back, my scar started to heal, and I was putting on weight. I stuck to my healthy meal regime for the most part, but I allowed myself some cheat days to savor the favorite meals I had missed during my illness. It's been 6 months now since I've been declared cancer-free, and I believe I'm finally ready to move on with my life. I made a call to my old job, and they're willing to rehire me for remote work if I choose to return. I think I'll take them up on the offer because I'm planning to move away. While I have an attachment to my house, there are too many painful memories here. I yearn for a fresh start with something smaller. My wife doesn't know it yet, but I'm planning to give the house to Kara. She came through for me when I was at my lowest, showing immense kindness even though we were practically strangers. She's free to sell it as she wishes. I no longer want anything to do with it, especially if it means my wife or daughter could lay claim to it. My new place is in a quiet neighborhood in the countryside, and I'm eagerly looking forward to this new beginning. Hey wife and daughter, it's been over a year since my initial diagnosis, and I've settled into my new place and neighborhood nicely. There are plenty of friendly folks around here, and I've made friends with my neighbors, including Sophia who lives across the way. She's a widow who lives alone with her kids, scattered across the country, visiting only during Christmas and her birthday. Sophia invited me to her porch for drinks and conversation, and she shared the heartbreaking story of losing her husband to lung cancer. She emphasized how important life insurance was for her family's financial security. During our conversation, I opened up about what happened with my wife and daughter. Surprisingly, I still hadn't heard a word from them, but I've come to terms with it. I've been spending my time pursuing new hobbies, particularly woodworking, and I'm starting to build up a collection of tools. One day when I returned from the hardware store, Sophia informed me that she had noticed some people hanging around my house. Fortunately, they didn't do anything harmful or steal anything, but they did approach the door, knock it a few times, wander around the house, and eventually waited in their car. Sophia considered calling the sheriff's office, but decided against it as she thought they might be family. I asked her to describe them, and her description matched my wife and daughter. I couldn't fathom how they had found my new residence, as only my brother and his wife knew my current address. It left me wondering why they were looking for me after leaving almost a year ago without looking back. Sophia assured me that if they returned, I shouldn't come out, and she would handle the situation. Frankly, I had no desire to interact with them after they abandoned me when I was at my lowest point. Later that night, I called my brother, who informed me that my wife and daughter had been harassing Kara and her roommate at my old house. Fortunately, Kara had documented proof that the house was now in her name, and she had explained that she had bought it for me, a smart move on her part. I felt bad that Kara had to go through this ordeal because of my family, so I called her directly to apologize. Hopefully, the next time they come around, I can resolve the situation for good. As for my wife, I'm not sure if she's aware of the unilateral divorce. My lawyer sent a copy to her mother's house, but it's possible they mistook it for junk mail. Regardless, I've reached a point where I no longer care. She and I are no more. My wife and daughter showed up at the house again, but this time it was earlier in the day while I was working. I heard the knock and decided to check the security cameras, and sure enough, it was them. My ex-wife looked just as I remembered her, but Luna had grown significantly. She was practically a young woman now. I followed the plans Sophia and I had discussed, staying inside but moving closer to the door to hear them better. Sophia, ever the good neighbour, came over to greet them and introduced herself. My wife asked if she knew a man named Charlie who used to live there. Sophia sounded just as baffled as I was and questioned her use of used to. My wife explained that her husband, not ex-husband, had lived in this house before his recent untimely death following an extended hospital stay. My jaw hit the floor at this revelation because, to my knowledge, there was no record of my death anywhere, especially not at the hospital where I underwent treatment. My wife went on to claim that they were the next of kin, implying that the home was rightfully theirs. Sophia informed them that someone named Charlie did live there for a while, but clarified that he was a divorcee. She also shared that during our time as neighbours, I had informed her that my wife had left me and I had filed for a unilateral divorce. Sophia added that as far as she knew, I intended to bequeath all my assets to charity since I had no other family besides my brother. This was why she found it strange to see two women snooping around my house. The conversation fell into an uncomfortable silence before Sophia inquired if they had a death certificate or a will. They replied in the negative. Sophia explained that once they had those documents, they could take them to the county's record office. If they were indeed the rightful owners of the property, they could then get the deed in their name. My wife did not take kindly to this suggestion. She asked Sophia who she thought she was and started screaming, asserting that Sophia had no authority to interfere in her affairs. She also accused Sophia of being nosy and demanded that she mind her own business. I felt a deep sense of embarrassment. The people in this neighbourhood had been nothing but kind to me, and here my ex-wife was making a scene and disturbing their peace. Part of me wanted to go out there and give her a piece of my mind, but I chose to stick with our plan. Sophia, bless her heart, apologized to them and explained that she was merely trying to be helpful. She returned to her own home, and shortly after, my ex-wife and daughter left. After finishing work, I went over to Sophia's place to apologize. She brushed it off, mentioning that while she found my wife's behaviour repulsive, she also found the outburst somewhat amusing. I wished I could agree with her, but I knew my wife could be hot-tempered when upset. If she ever returns, I am determined to confront her and ask her to leave me in peace. She came back again yesterday. I was sitting in my home office when I heard a loud crash. Rushing out to the living room, I found my front window smashed and people were outside screaming. I thought there might be a maniac on the loose, and it turns out I wasn't entirely wrong. It was my ex-wife. She had smashed my window, and my neighbours were out there trying to stop her. Apparently, she had been causing a ruckus for a while, but I hadn't heard it because I had my noise-cancelling headphones on while doing some QA work. Frankly, I wouldn't have heard her even if I hadn't paused the mic for a break. When I got outside, two of my elderly neighbours were doing their best to restrain my ex from causing more damage. Both she and Luna were holding bats, and they had already broken a few of my potted plants. I grabbed her by the arm and asked if she had lost her Dan marbles. Needless to say, she was shocked to see me, or rather, shocked to see me alive. I told both her and my daughter to get off my property before I called the cops. Unbeknownst to me, my neighbours had already placed the call. She seemed hurt by my words and asked why I hadn't contacted her after I got better. She insisted that she and Luna would have come back. I told her that when we got married, we made vows to stand by each other in sickness and health, and she broke those vows. I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. She's no longer my wife. I sent the divorce papers months ago. I asked her again to leave. Then she asked about her daughter and mentioned that she's going to college next year and she can't afford the tuition on her own. I replied, "Your daughter was fine with abandoning me too, and I'm ready to give up all my parental rights to you. You should have thought of that before you abandoned me. I don't want anything to do with either of you." After hearing that, she went from upset to angry, calling me selfish and heartless, which I found rather amusing given the circumstances. "You're the last person who should be calling anyone selfish," I screamed back, called her an entitled jerk, and made it clear that I'd ensure she never got a dime from me again. Then she swung at me with a bat just as the cops showed up. They immediately arrested both her and my daughter. They asked if I wanted to press charges, and of course I did. My ex and daughter started crying loudly as they were loaded into the back of the police car, but I felt no sympathy for them. I had everything that happened on camera, including my wife smashing the window, and I had already submitted it to the police. After work, I ordered a new window and cleaned up the glass. Someone will be coming to deal with it tomorrow, but for now, a rigged-up tarp is keeping out the elements. Sophia gave me some buckets to put my plants in until I can replace the pots. Curious about what had brought my ex-wife back, I did some digging. It turns out her mom passed away 2 months ago, and they found out that the house they had been staying in didn't belong to her or her husband. It belonged to his cousin. The cousin decided to kick them out because he wanted to sell it. With both of my ex-wife's parents now gone, she and our daughter sold most of their parents' belongings and had been living in a motel for a while. When they came back to our old home and saw Cara there, they assumed I had died and went snooping around for recordings of my assets and purchases, which is how they found me. Regardless, they're facing charges of vandalism, attempted break-in, and attempted assault. Since Luna is a minor, she's receiving community service, but my ex-wife is facing time behind bars, as this was clearly premeditated. I'm considering obtaining a restraining order as well. At least for now. I won't have to worry about her for a good long while. I was a middle-aged man in the middle of nowhere, serving drinks to my boss at a company party and trying to keep him in a good mood. I'm turning 32 this year, as my friends and co-workers get married one by one. There hasn't been a hint of romance in my life. I know just waiting won't lead to any romantic encounters, but there's someone I can't seem to forget, which is likely why I don't feel compelled to actively seek a partner. Once my boss's lengthy monologue finally concluded, I excused myself to the restroom. I thought I might step outside and get a breath of fresh air, just to space out a bit. And as I was wandering down the hallway of the bar, I bumped into her, the person I would never forget. My high school sweetheart. She has a more mature vibe now, but it was definitely Susan. She seemed to have noticed me too, and stopped in the middle of the hallway. "Jack." She called my name, then fell silent. "It's been a while. I'm here having drinks with my boss." We hadn't been in touch for over a decade since our falling out, so I wasn't sure how to interact with her. "I'm here for dinner with friends." Despite this unexpected reunion, that was all the conversation we managed to have. We parted ways with a simple "well then." Susan and I dated since high school, and our relationship continued even as we attended different colleges. But we broke up over a fight during our job hunting phase. I was the one to blame. Susan, a brilliant and beautiful woman, was attending a prestigious university. She secured a job relatively early. However, I was the complete opposite. I attended a mediocre college and had a hard time finding a job during my senior year. I grew frustrated as I still couldn't land a job. It would have been bearable if that was it, but I was jealous of Susan. Despite her trying to support me and consider my feelings, I back then felt pitiful, as if being pitied. I lashed out at her with harsh words like, "You wouldn't understand how I feel. You're probably looking down on me. And stop acting like a goody two-shoes, making a fool out of me." I even said something far worse. It was only natural that she eventually got fed up with me. After parting with Susan, I managed to secure a job at my current company, but there was no more communication between Susan and me. In my 20s, I learned from a high school classmate that Susan got married and moved to Chicago due to her husband's job transfer. I had mixed feelings, but also felt relieved. As long as she was happy somewhere, that was good enough for me. After hearing about her marriage, I thought it was about time for me to move on as well. So I did. I went on a few blind dates, but I never really met anyone suitable. And that brings us to now. About a week after running into Susan at the bar, I was visiting my favourite cafe after work. I enjoyed buying coffee beans from this place and brewing coffee at home on my days off. I developed a love for coffee back in college. Now I've become so particular about selecting beans and how I grind them. As I entered the cafe, eager for a new batch of beans, there was Susan enjoying a cake set. This was our second encounter. "We meet again," I murmured, surprised at the unexpected coincidence. "Really? Are you alone?" I briefly explained that I often come here to buy coffee beans. "What about you? Are you alone? Isn't your husband waiting at home? I didn't even know you were back from Chicago." And my words, Susan lowered her eyes, and she opened her mouth, putting on a forced smile. "My husband passed away 4 years ago. I've been living in Chicago since then. I've only recently moved back here." "I see. I'm sorry. That was thoughtless of me. I didn't know her husband had passed away. I thought she was still building a happy home." After that, our conversation didn't continue, and we said, "See you," and parted again. Susan, who lost her husband and lives alone in San Francisco. I want to talk to her more. I want to get closer to her. But I don't feel I have the right because I hurt her with my harsh words at the end of our relationship. About a month later, on a night of a terrible typhoon, I had my third encounter with my widow ex-girlfriend, Susan. My apartment is beyond the station, so I passed by the station on my way home from work. The station was crowded with people. The trains were stopped or delayed. In the midst of all this, I found Susan on the phone, taking shelter from the rain. Susan also noticed me immediately and called out to me. "Amazing, we met again. Yeah, is the train stopped?" When I asked, Susan nodded with a bitter smile. "It stopped. I don't know when it'll start moving again. But both the buses and taxis are crowded with people, so it doesn't look like I'll be able to get on. I just tried calling a nearby hotel, but it's no good. It's hard to find a place that's open, even when it's not a typhoon. This station is busy, so I guess that's inevitable." But when I glanced at Susan, her clothes and hair were wet. Even though it's early spring, the nights are chilly. I handed her a handkerchief. "Use this. You must be cold." "Oh, thank you." I had an umbrella, but the rain and wind were so strong. When I found Susan, the rain and wind had just come down. But before that, both the rain and the wind had been terrible, and the sky looked like it was going to start pouring again soon. I couldn't just leave Susan, who had no way to get home or a hotel to stay in. "Do you want to come to my place?" The words naturally slipped out of my mouth, but I immediately regretted them. There's no way she'd want to come to the home of her ex-boyfriend, who she always fought with. That's what I thought. But Susan's response was unexpected. "You're willing to let me stay?" When I looked at Susan, she looked up at me with moist eyes. I felt nervous looking into the eyes of her, who had become more mature, but those eyes seemed to be asking me for help. "Sure, come on." At my words, Susan smiled softly and seemed relieved, and so Susan came to stay at my apartment. When we got home, I had Susan, who was probably cold from getting wet, take a bath. Seeing Susan with her wet hair after the bath, wearing my clothes as a change of pyjamas, made my heart race. But I had no ulterior motive in inviting her, so I tried to hide it. After drying her hair, Susan said, "I'd like some coffee. Could you brew it for me? I've been missing it for a while." There was a bag of coffee beans and a grinder where Susan was looking. I used to make coffee for her frequently when we were in college and dating. "Sure," I replied. I ground the beans carefully just for Susan. She was watching me so attentively that I asked, "Do you want to try grinding the beans?" At first Susan nodded, but then she hesitated and said, "Actually, I'll pass." "I want you to do it, Jack." "I've missed your coffee," she said. Even if her words were just courtesy, they made me happy. As the coffee was almost ready, I asked her how she wanted it. "Do you want it as a café au lait?" "Yes, you remember that," she said. Susan couldn't drink black coffee when we were dating. I always made it into café au lait by adding milk for her. I still remember it. "Well, of course, I remember it," I said, offering Susan the freshly made café au lait. Susan took the mug from me with both hands and carefully brought it to her lips. "Ah, it's delicious. The aroma is soothing. I've missed this. I've missed your café au lait." After we broke up, I've been wanting to drink it for over 10 years. I've been holding back for more than 10 years. The phrase "more than 10 years" seemed to have significant weight. I poured my own coffee too. Like in my college days, and even now, I prefer it black. Drinking my own brewed coffee is my daily routine. But today's coffee, which I shared with Susan, tasted even better than usual. After finishing our coffee, we discussed where we were going to sleep, jokingly. "I only have one bed. Is it okay if we sleep together?" I wanted Susan, who seemed to feel guilty for staying over, to at least smile. I figured she'd retort with something like, "No, it's not okay," since she's got a vibe like that. But her reply was okay, stun. I looked at Susan, who was looking at me with a serious expression. "I've been lonely since my husband passed away," she said. I couldn't help but feel an urge to hug Susan, but I knew this didn't mean she had feelings for me. Susan has been spending lonely nights since her husband's death. Today, perhaps due to the stormy weather, her loneliness had just erupted. I thought if she spent the night in the same room, more bed with me, she'd regret it. And not just Susan, I might regret letting the mood carry me away, even though I care about her. So, I thought there was only one thing I could do. "Susan, I'm sorry for my inappropriate joke. You can sleep on the bed. I'll sleep on the living room couch. I don't want you to regret anything because of your current feelings," I said. Maybe Susan had anticipated what I was going to say. Susan nodded without arguing or saying anything. "No, you're right. I'm sorry," she said. It seemed Susan agreed, which relieved me. Even though I decided not to get swept away, considering that this might be the last time I saw Susan, I thought I should apologize for something I had wanted to apologize for a long time. "Susan, I'm sorry about when we broke up." "When did we broke up? Do you mean the argument we had?" I found myself rethinking whether I could call what happened an argument. From the moment we started dating until we broke up, I never saw a single fault in Susan. When we were in high school, I once asked her why she would even consider dating a guy like me. Back then, just like now, I was a pretty ordinary guy, mediocre at academics and sports. In contrast, Susan was rumoured to be adorable, an honour student, popular with teachers, and highly academic. I just couldn't see what balanced out between us. But as it turns out, Susan and I did not meet for the first time in high school. Apparently, We were in the same class in kindergarten, a fact I had forgotten. I'm told I protected Susan back then when she was being bullied. From that point on, I was considered a hero in Susan's eyes. Susan moved away when we were in senior kindergarten, but she told me that she never forgot about me. I had no recollection of doing anything so admirable. I vaguely remember helping a girl back then, but I feel like I was just trying to show off being a little kindergartner. Susan recounted the story of our kindergarten days several times after we started dating. I used to find it cute that she remembered such things. But by the time I was job hunting, I was sick of hearing it because it just wasn't possible for a pathetic guy like me, who couldn't even secure a job, to be a hero. That was when I had just been rejected by the 10th company. I was feeling the bitter truth of how much your alma mater matters in job hunting. With no job offers coming my way, I felt like I was being denied as a person. Susan, who had already secured a job, was trying to encourage me, but I was so immature at that time. I found Susan's kindness annoying. So, I told her, "Shut up. Everything is so perfect for you, Susan. You've always been a top student, got into a good college, found a job right away. You don't know what it feels like to be a failure like me." Susan's eyes were welling up with tears. "Don't talk like that about yourself, Jack. You're my hero, but I was even frustrated with my job search. And my frustration was maxed out when she told me this story. I'm tired of hearing that story. I don't know. I can't remember stuff from kindergarten. Stop imposing your ideals on me. I'm not your hero. In fact, I don't want to hear your pointless stories anymore. You're annoying me." I still can't forget the look on Susan's face when I said that. It hurt that day. I told her to go away, and she left, her shoulders drooping. After that, I ignored Susan, who kept apologizing. I just wanted her to leave me alone. Then one day she told me over the phone, "Let's break up." It was only natural, considering the awful things I had said. All I think I said was, "I understand." As I was reminiscing, Susan's voice brought me back to reality. She was laughing at my apology, a decade late. "No, it's okay. It's not all your fault, she said. "Looking back, I think I should have stood back and watched over you a little more. I was young, and I just thought I had to be there for you, that I had to say something to encourage you. I think that just put more pressure on you and made you more irate. Maybe we were just too young, both of us." I was happy at Susan's kindness, saying that, even though I was the one to blame, but when we meet again in high school after being apart since kindergarten, I really thought it was destiny. But I guess it wasn't. We really can't be together, can we? I had nothing to say to that. That day, we slept in separate rooms, and when I woke up the next day, Susan was gone from my apartment. The room without Susan felt cold, as if the temperature had dropped. That's when I spotted a note from Susan on the table. "If we meet again, I hope we can be together." I saw that and ran out of the house. Surprisingly, I caught up with Susan quickly. As I ran towards the station, she was walking slowly, her eyes swollen from crying. I moved to stand in front of Susan and took her hand. I squeezed her slightly cold hand warmly before expressing my feelings. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'd regret it if I let things slide yesterday, but that was just an excuse. The truth is, I've always loved you, and I still do. I was just being a coward yesterday. I was scared. I had hurt you once, and I wondered if I could make you happy again. I also thought I definitely couldn't beat your deceased husband. I was thinking if it was okay for me, if I had the right to say I wanted to be by your side. I was scared and couldn't say anything. Susan's handwriting on the note was shaky. I thought she must have written it while crying, and my chest tightened. So I started running. Susan, you said our reunion in high school was destiny. I feel the same way. I think our reunion here as adults is destiny. I won't hurt you anymore. I'll cherish you in my own way, without comparing myself to anyone else. So, I want to be with you. Please, give me another chance. Will you date me? After I finished speaking, I felt somewhat embarrassed. I mean, a guy over 30 talking about destiny. But it seemed Susan felt the same way. She chuckled and said, "Sometimes you can be such a romantic, Jack. But I love that about you." Susan and I smiled and made eye contact. "Do you want to go back to my place again? I'll make you a delicious cup of coffee. Of course, I'll make yours a latte. Let's talk about the past and the future." "That sounds good. I have a lot of things I want to talk about too." We then walked hand in hand back to my place. Since then, Susan and I have been dating smoothly, and tomorrow, after about a year, we are getting married. Today, we came to visit the grave of Susan's previous husband. This is not the first time I've come to visit his grave with Susan. Before I confessed to Susan, I was pessimistic about whether I could make her happy like her previous husband did. But I realized it's not about comparing. The fact that her husband cherished Susan, I accept that. And I decided to cherish Susan in my own way. That's why I visited the grave, that I wanted him to rest easy. I'll protect Susan's smile. When Susan asked what I was thinking about when I was paying respects, I kept it a secret. It's a secret conversation between men that I can't tell Susan. Susan was smiling, saying, "I'm curious," but she seemed rather happy. After visiting the grave, we returned to our new home, our own home, to live together. When I was about to make coffee, Susan said she preferred juice. She usually doesn't say things like that, so I was worried and asked if she was feeling unwell. But seeing me flustered, Susan grinned. Then she placed a hand on her stomach and said, "I'll have to pass on the latte for a while. The caffeine might startle this little one." As I realized what her words meant, I couldn't help but yell out in joy. I held Susan in my arms. Our baby is due in 7 months. I can't wait for this new chapter of our lives. So, how did you like our story? Your subscription to our channel greatly motivates us to create more content. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video. "Please marry my daughter," my father-in-law implored. I was so taken aback by his words that my mind went blank. "Her, Mary, you mean me and your daughter Emily?" Emily is my ex-wife's sister. She's probably just graduated from college. When I met Emily, she was still in middle or high school, and I remember fondly how much I adored her. The thought of me marrying Emily is just inconceivable. After all, regardless of who it is, I have no intention of falling in love or marrying again. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Besides, I have no plans to marry again. I intend to live alone for the rest of my life, I said, showing my respect. Then my father-in-law made an even more surprising statement. "That's even better. Our interests aligned perfectly." "What? What do you mean?" I asked. "I'm John. 3 years ago, I lost my beloved wife, Laura. She passed away only 2 years after we got married. When my wife started feeling unwell, and we went to the hospital, she was suddenly given only a year to live. Laura endured painful treatments and fought bravely. She held on 18 days longer than her prognosis, but unfortunately, she passed away. At the time, both Laura and I were just 30 years old, and we naturally imagined a happy future with children and a loving family. But all that was lost, and I couldn't harbour any hope for the future without Laura. I couldn't imagine a happy life. That's why I thought. So, of course, I don't want children anymore, nor do I intend to engage in love or marriage. I live a modest life alone, hoping to reunite with Laura in the afterlife and finally live together. I've never been religious, but I find comfort in such thoughts. 3 years later, about a week after Laura's death anniversary, I hadn't seen my in-laws much since Laura's funeral and sorting out her belongings. But they contacted me after a long time. It's been 3 years since she passed. Without thinking deeply, I went to Laura's parents' house as an invitation. Laura's father is the CEO of a large corporation. Laura was the daughter of the CEO, and she worked at her father's company. I joined the company as a recent graduate and met Laura there. I'm not ambitious, so I never thought about promotions or climbing the corporate ladder. I was surprised to learn, after dating, that Laura was the CEO's daughter. Her father liked me and even talked about me being the next CEO. But after Laura passed away, I knew I wasn't the one to take over. So, I resigned from the company. It was a bit awkward meeting them again after all this time. However, what Laura's father said at their house was completely unexpected. "Please marry Emily." I was so surprised that I went blank. "Huh? Marry Emily? Me? Emily is Laura's sister. She must have just graduated from college or something. When Laura was alive, Emily was still in high school. And I remember how fondly I adored her. The thought of marrying Emily is just inconceivable. Regardless of who the other person is, I have no intention of falling in love or marrying again. Yet, the idea of marrying my late wife's sister is bizarre to anyone. Still, for my in-laws to make such a request, there must be a significant reason behind it. But I can't agree to it. I understand. There might be circumstances. But I'm sorry, I can't do it. I haven't thought about marrying anyone other than Laura. I plan to live alone for the rest of my life, I said, showing my respect. Then my father-in-law made another surprising statement. That's even better. Our interests align perfectly. What? What do you mean? I was completely lost by the true meaning of his words, so I asked again. He then suggested, "Can I call Emily herself?" I was confused but agreed. When my father-in-law called for Emily, she quietly entered, probably from the next room. She sat down in the chair next to her father, across from me. I've seen Laura and Emily get along many times, but I can't say I'm close to Emily myself. We've only had a few one-on-one conversations, and I thought Emily would be in trouble if she asked me to marry her. I'm really sorry for this sudden request, but Emily insisted. I was shocked again when my father-in-law said that. What? Emily, did I become even more confused? Seeing my confusion, my father-in-law said, "You guys talk about this together," and left the room. There was a moment of silence, and then Emily said, "I'm really sorry for suddenly making such a rude request. I think the last time we met, she was still a student." I was relieved to see she hadn't changed much from her humble and polite demeanour back then, despite such an absurd request. "Well, yes." Unsure of how to respond, I replied hesitantly. And Emily began to explain the situation. "I have a fiancé, but he was someone my father chose for me." Aha! I thought such situations only existed in dramas. Being the daughter of a big company CEO must be tough. My father loved my bright, kind, and intelligent sister Laura, and he always said he wanted you to take over the company. Losing both of them, I think he's desperate for an heir. Laura and Emily had no brothers. I guess the company really is in trouble with the successor issue. That's why he wants to marry me off quickly and prepare the next heir. But I don't want to get married. Not ever. Emily's eyes showed a strong resolve, clearly indicating her aversion to marriage. It felt intrusive to ask why she didn't want to marry, so I asked what concerned me most. Then, why do you want to marry me? She didn't seem to have any affection for me. Emily hesitated before looking me in the eye and saying, I thought everything would be neatly resolved with you. It's selfish of me. I don't want to marry, but I have to for my father. But I don't want to be in a romantic relationship. Initially, I thought it impossible to find someone who felt the same about marriage and love. But then I remembered you said the same at my sister's funeral. That's why I'm making this selfish request. I'm sorry. I finally understood why I was being asked such an absurd thing. Of course, I don't intend to have a marital relationship or children. If you join my father's company, you could become the next CEO, and the compensation would be substantial. I'll try to meet any questions or demands you have, so please consider it, Emily said. Aside from the fact of becoming my sister-in-law's husband, there was no particular reason for me to refuse. I'm not passionate about my current job, so working for my father-in-law, who needs me, seems like a way to be useful to someone. I have no siblings and my parents have already passed away, so entering or leaving a family register wouldn't affect anyone. The most important fact is Emily's desperation to the point of proposing such an unusual solution. If my marriage can help resolve this situation, it might be worth considering. However, the problem is that she is Laura's sister. Even though there are circumstances, I wonder what Laura would think if she knew I married Emily and lived with her. Even if it's not a romantic relationship, it might not sit well with her. Of course, Laura has passed away and wouldn't know, but I still didn't want to do anything that might sadden her or make me unable to face her, even if it seemed minor. What should I do? My feelings are strong, but Emily's desperate plea is also reaching me. That's why I couldn't respond immediately, creating an awkward silence. Then Emily stood up, with her eyes filled with tears. I know it's not something I should ask of my sister's husband, but please, I'm begging you, Emily said, her voice trembling. At that moment, I suddenly remembered seeing a similar scene in the past. Back then, still in her school uniform and quite innocent, Emily would cry so much she couldn't speak, and Laura would embrace and comfort her. Several times, Emily's expression would change, and then, always with a smile, she would say, "Thank you, sis," and leave. Remembering this, I finally made up my mind. If Laura could see us now, I felt like she would say, "I'm fine, so please take care of Emily." I understand. I'll accept it, I said. Hearing my words, Emily expressed her gratitude many times. And so I ended up living a married life with my deceased wife's sister, Emily. But in reality, it was nothing like a marriage. We would eat separately, do our own laundry and dishes. We set up a rotation for cleaning common areas, and since we both worked, there was no financial interference. It was more like sharing a room with a stranger. So we made thorough rules. "Thank you for accepting my proposal on her first day at our house," Emily said. Polly. Then she went straight to Laura's altar and prayed for a long time. This was the house Laura and I lived in. The thought of living with Emily, whom Laura adored, made me wonder what Laura would think. That day took so long to move in and organize Emily's belongings that before we knew it, it was night. "I'm going to the convenience store, since we don't have much. Do you want me to buy anything?" I asked Emily as she was organizing her room. Suddenly surprised by my question, Emily seemed to accidentally bump her arm into the shelf. Are you okay? When I asked in surprise, she said, I'm fine, sorry. Ah, could you please get pasta for me? Emily replied. Such casual conversations had ceased completely since Laura passed away. It was a bittersweet feeling, missing Laura and feeling lonely with someone who wasn't her. I decided to eat in the living room. After returning from the convenience store, it was awkward as we had hardly ever talked one-on-one. But avoiding each other by eating in separate bedrooms felt too blatant and disrespectful. While absent-mindedly eating my ready meal, I noticed what looked like a bruise on Emily's arm. Is that from when you hurt yourself earlier? Are you sure you don't need to ice it? Upon hearing my words, Emily quickly covered her arm with her sleeve. I felt something was off, but didn't think much of it at the time. Was it insensitive of me to bring up the bruise on a woman? I thought, deciding not to mention it again. However, Emily's puzzling behaviour continued. When Emily tried to do the dishes after dinner, I suggested, I'll take care of it. You can continue with your room. As I turned around to switch places, Emily quickly covered her neck and turned toward me abruptly. Her expression seemed panicked and angry, so I involuntarily said, Oh, I'm sorry. I reflected on whether my sudden approach had startled her. I thought I had maintained a proper distance, but I'm the one who should apologize. Thank you for the dishes, Emily said quickly, and then rushed to her room. By this point, I already had a vague sense of unease, and that turned into certainty just before going to bed. After finishing my bath, my bedroom is right before the bathroom, so I could have gone straight to bed. But I thought it would be rude not to say anything, so I headed to the living room where Emily was. Emily was praying at Laura's altar, and seeing her devotion made me feel a bit warmer. Thinking about the close bond between the sisters, as she finished praying, and I was about to tell her I was going to bed, I noticed a suspicious bruise on the back of her neck. From a distance, it looked like a mark left by something tightly wrapped around it. After observing her behaviour throughout the day, I had a gut feeling that I couldn't just leave it be and asked, What happened to that bruise? I knew she might not like it, but I asked anyway. Emily turned around, surprised, and then tried to evade the question. Emily struggled to find her words. Sensing she had a difficult situation to discuss, I patiently waited for her next words, which came sooner than expected. I can't believe you agreed to marry me, listening to such a huge selfish request. I can keep secrets from you. Then Emily rolled up her sleeve to reveal her arm. I was shocked at what I saw. Her arm was covered in bruises of various shapes and ages. I was abused by the person I was dating, being hit, burnt. It was a daily occurrence, and I became used to it. I knew I had to leave, but I couldn't because I loved him. I grew to hate myself more and more for being so weak, Emily spoke painfully. And then I realized why she was so scared when I went behind her. It reminded her of her traumatic experiences, I thought. But I was dumbfounded when he dumped me so abruptly, saying he'd found someone else he liked. I endured so much pain just because I didn't want to be hated by him, yet to be let go so easily was a shock. More than anything, I was surprised by how sad I felt about the breakup, even though the days had been so tough, Emily continued. The range of negative emotions on her face was palpable: sadness, frustration, fear. It pained my heart to see her like this, so different from the smiling face she used to show Laura. Since then, I've tried to start new relationships for a friend's introduction, but I developed a fear of men. Even a slight touch from a man made me tremble with fear, and just talking to them would set my heart racing. I used to dream of a normal life, getting married, having kids, but now I realize those dreams might never come true. I learned the hard way that the scars of abuse are lifelong issues, something I wish I'd realized sooner. And then, as if oblivious to her condition, my father-in-law-to-be announced our engagement. The thought of marriage was impossible for her, with her fear of men. Indeed, in this situation, it would be unfair to the person she'd marry. Emily, desperate to avoid marriage, thought of me. Since I knew her from before and wouldn't demand a romantic relationship given her condition, plus it would please her father, that's how she came to the idea of marrying me. I'm so sorry for involving you in my selfishness. My sister might even be angry. What am I doing? Emily broke down, all her pent-up emotions collapsing. She cried endlessly, tears flowing one after the other, words unable to capture her pain. It was reminiscent of the times when Laura was there, but now there's no Laura to comfort and reassure her. But I'm still here, just like back then. I may not be able to replace Laura, but I can carry on her legacy. Laura would definitely not be angry. She always said she wanted to be on your side no matter what. I'm sure Laura still wishes for your happiness more than anyone else. It's true that Laura isn't here anymore, but her love for you hasn't disappeared. So, let's calm down and really think about what will make you happy, I said. Emily nodded through her tears as I spoke. Then, after she had calmed down, I made a confession. First of all, I hadn't registered our marriage yet. I showed her paperwork for the marriage, filled out and meant to be registered today. There was no rush, so I decided to bring it back home to make sure this was really what she wanted. Emily was surprised, but I now think it was for the best. The wounds in your heart are immeasurable. Healing them might not be easy, but as long as you still have the true desire to someday marry someone you love and have children, I want to honor that wish. I'll do anything to support you as your brother-in-law, I said. Perhaps her true feeling had been buried under fear, haste, and consideration for her parents, but Emily's true hope was indeed here. Jess, thank you so much, Emily said, tears welling up again. Thus, Emily and I managed to avoid getting married at the last minute and started living new days. Of course, we stopped living together. We explained the situation to her parents. They understood, and Emily began visiting a clinic for mental health care. Although legally my marital relationship with late Laura had ended, the familial ties still existed. So, with her father's wish, I officially took on the role as the heir, being the husband of Laura. My stance of not marrying anyone but Laura hasn't changed, but now I have caring in-laws and a sister-in-law. Even though we're not related by blood, this alone has made me feel that I'm not living a life alone. At first, I thought marrying my late wife's sister was an absurd suggestion, but it's thanks to that proposal that I have this life now. Looking back, I think that it must have meant something. That's how I feel about it now. If Laura were looking down on us, I bet she'd say the same thing.